Hi, I'm Tom Woods, and you're listening to the Libertarian Christian Podcast.
Welcome to the show that gets Christians thinking about faith and politics. Get ready to challenge the status quo, expand your imagination, and tackle controversy head on. Let's stand together at the intersection of faith and freedom. It's time for the Libertarian Christian Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Libertarian Christian Podcast, a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute. I'm your host, Doug Stuart, and for this episode, I have good news, bad news, literally. LCI is producing a new video series, and we are hoping that this will last for a very long time. We're going to have a roundtable, and we are recording it over video. We are releasing it on our YouTube channel, and it will be available on Facebook. So if you follow us on social media and on YouTube, you'll be able to find it. You can also see the original post on our website, so you can get to it from all of our things. We're not going to be posting it through our podcast. At least we're not planning to do it that way. But for this episode, I want you to get a taste of what it is that we're up to. So we have a roundtable of commentators. Kerry Baldwin, who's an author at libertarianchristians.com, myself, Norman Horn, and Matthew Bellis, whose voice you hear at the beginning of every one of our episodes. So what we do is we talk about current events. We don't just want to have content that's like, oh, you could listen to this at any time. We do that with our podcast. We do that with our articles. But we also want to kind of commentate on what's going on in the world. And so we're going to start with every other week. We are going to do them on basically a Saturday, and they'll release over the weekend. So we hope you enjoy it, and you can listen to the first episode, which incidentally will probably be the longest one because we are going to try to keep these to 20 to 25 minutes, and this one went to 36. So we're getting our bearings. But in any case, enjoy, and please subscribe on YouTube and go check us out. So welcome to Good News, Bad News from the Libertarian Christian Institute, where we have a roundtable of commentators talking about the most recent events in the world, in America, in the internet, and we are going to assess everything. We're going to edify, encourage, and we want this to be for Christian libertarians, but we hope anybody who listens and watches can benefit from it. So I kind of chose Proverbs 25:25 as sort of a theme verse, like cold water to a weary soul is good news from a distant land. Well, libertarians seem like they're from a distant land to a lot of people, so hopefully we can bring some good news from our land to yours. So you want to probably know who we are. We are the Libertarian Christian Institute. We want to equip the church to promote a free society and make the Christian case for a free society. So I am the CEO of the Libertarian Christian Institute, and joined with me are my three comrades, Norman, Kerry, and Matt. And for you to get to know us, we're just going to talk about who we are real quick and what we did on 4th of July. Norman, what's your normal 4th of July look like? And what did you do this year because you had fewer freedoms, I guess? I don't know. What'd you do?
Well, historically, I'm usually in the hill country of Texas celebrating the 4th of July. That's definitely where I spent most of my time growing up in the summer, like that, doing that sort of thing. But so I don't really have the same developed traditions that some people do with going out, seeing massive fireworks shows or something like that. So it doesn't that stuff doesn't matter as much to me. But I did get to spend some time with my family, my in-laws this year in Missouri, and that was a good time. We actually did get to barbecue a little, and that was fun. And yeah, it was just pretty relaxing. So not too much now that the kids aren't really old enough to be able to stay up too late. So that was also, we can't really go out or anything to that effect. So yeah, not particularly significant on my end.
Kerry, you are in New Mexico, which apparently is the highest, has the best rating on the internet for the governor's overreactions to the COVID. So
speaking of distant lands,
were you allowed to go out? Yeah, right. Were you allowed to go outside? What is your normal 4th of July like?
Yeah.
My normal 4th of July is that, we go up to my parents' house. They live up in Rio Rancho, and they kind of live up on a hill. And so you can overlook the Rio Grande Valley and you can see all the fireworks. And so we'll go up there and, barbecue or something like that, and then sit back and just watch everybody's fireworks shows. So this year, it was illegal for us to basically leave our homes and go do anything. Our wonderful governor told us, obey my edicts and you can celebrate your independence next year, is basically what she said. So I celebrated my independence by doing what I normally do and going up to my parents' house. And it was very low key, but with all of this COVID stuff and the masks, oh my gosh, she's enforcing the masks now, which is insane. But yeah.
Would it take the governor of New Mexico to ban all chilies for the people of New Mexico to rise up and revolt?
Probably. Yeah.
They have to include the Applebee's too.
Yeah.
No, I think he means the green chilies. Yes. So we have green chilies, and that's our thing. And don't mess with our green chilies because
fast casual notwithstanding. So
yes.
Matt, what's your normal 4th of July like, and what did you do different?
Well, actually, we didn't really do a whole lot different because I refuse to bow down to anybody who tries to infringe on my liberties. And frankly, we live in the cradle of liberty. So we often visit historical sites that go through our nation's founding, the Revolutionary War. Last year, we were out at Valley Forge and going through the battlefield there. And we decided this year to go through the Civil War battlefield over in Gettysburg. And so we actually got to tour around and do some things there. I would say, though, the only different thing is there were a lot more men with open carry guns around trying to protect monuments and statues. So that's really the only thing different. It wasn't different with me. It was different with everybody else. So
yeah. Well, you and I are both.
Fours and sparklers were had.
You and I are both in Pennsylvania, although my normal habit for 4th of July is I go to West Virginia to see my parents, and they have an actual fireworks display in the nearby town that is pretty impressive for a small town. And actually, it's pretty impressive for a big town, to be honest. And that was about the only thing we didn't do. We went to my parents, and we took our new puppy and enjoyed the 6 acres of country. So that was about it. We didn't wear masks when we barbecued, and so far we're still healthy. Yeah, so hopefully that'll give us an introduction of who we are. And I want to talk first about current events. And one of them is just kind of baffling to me. Norman, I'm going to let you introduce what exactly is going on here. But the question is, why does the left seem to hate free speech? I thought they were champions of free speech.
It is rather baffling. And I think that amongst those of the more, let's call it the more moderate left, there's still a modicum of free speech among many of them. And I think that is sort of exemplified to an extent in the recent open letter that was sent to Harper's Magazine, published by over 150 scholars, authors, various people from various public-facing jobs and otherwise, journalists, academics, etc. This open letter is it's not even 2,000 words long. It is not a long letter. And all it does is basically says, hey, the trend that we're seeing of people going through cancellations as a result of just seemingly benign things is absolutely getting out of control. And you would think, that the promotion of the value of free speech and in more of an open way. Now, as we know, as libertarians, the idea of free speech is qualified. You don't necessarily it's qualified by property rights. As in, the question of who gets to say fire in a crowded theater is not contingent upon your free speech right, but rather on who owns the theater and so on and so forth. But the general modicum or value of free speech in an open society that goes even a little beyond the restriction of the government in order to punish it is still there's a value in that. And that is, getting really attacked on all sides by the most radical people on the left. And to be fair, this has happened on the right as well at times. But what we're seeing now is something that makes McCarthyism look like, yesterday's news.
Yeah.
And that's just insane. And that's what this Harper's letter was kind of trying to emphasize a little bit. Although it didn't reach out and talk about McCarthyism, but it alluded to, issues of the radical right at times. And okay, fine.
Question, Norm. Did it speak on the trope that I've heard multiple times that free speech is hate speech?
Yeah, it kind of notes that to an extent. But the kind of interesting side or secondary effect here is that almost instantaneously after this starts going out, you see the Twitter war just going completely bananas. and even the reactionary articles to it. I mean, people are writing response articles against this that are, 10x as long as the original article.
Wow.
I mean, it's, I understand the so-called, BS principle, that it takes an order of magnitude more work to refute BS in order than to write it. But this is out of control. And I think it's really significant as to where we are, in our society right now in America, where this is really kicked up a notch in a way that is beyond unhealthy. And I mean, we gotta admit, like, social pressure isn't bad. Okay, like social pressuring is not inherently a bad thing. In fact, look in our libertarian literature, and you'll see, one of the ways in which we expect that good values are upheld is through social pressuring, through even ostracizing to an extent. But this is a step beyond. So again, there are elements of it that you can be on board with on some level, but the level of which it has reached is now way outside of the realm of where we ought to approve of at that point.
Yeah, social pressure is always better than state pressure, because
exactly.
one of the fundamental tenets of libertarianism is the difference between culture or society and the state. But a lot of people sort of kind of want to merge those and so forth.
It's instructive to us as libertarians to recognize where even we might even say cancel culture kind of gets it right on some level, which is, I mean, and I've just been railing against it on one side, but I'm going to, pivot and say, there aren't, it's not completely wrong, right? There are things we can recognize about it that are valuable, but the way in which it ultimately gets practiced is getting out of control. Kerry, I'm sorry, I kind of preempted you there.
I was just going to say, I mean, social pressure is one thing when it's spontaneously arises from culture, but that's not entirely what we have here, because we have a media driving a narrative, we have politicians driving a narrative, and you have people latching onto that and then, bringing up their cancel culture and that sort of thing. So we have a situation where the state is still pretty heavily involved in whatever that cancel culture is. And so it's not even the libertarian way that we would conceive of that social pressure.
Yeah, it's on the verge of whacked out citizen arrest. I mean,
It almost seems to at least divulge, because I think the way that cancel culture has been used primarily is a little bit of a slippery slope to where it may be, hey, we're just not going to listen to this person, or we're not going to shop at their business anymore, to then turn around and say, we're going to use the powers of the state to try and cancel these people, remove licenses, and remove all kinds of abilities that they have to make a living.
Yeah.
So to me, it's insidious on that standpoint, because it sets up a precedent that is far beyond what we would see normally as just regular interactions between free people who may disagree with one another.
Yeah. I want to lead that to talk about canceling people and livelihood and so forth. I mean, we need to talk about what's happening with cash. Kerry, you wanted to talk about cash, and I'm going to places, and these places are like, hey, we don't want to accept cash. We're just going to use card. I even, I know somebody who said, well, this is just evidence of a new world order and, the end times and all this other stuff. And it's like, we're going to a cashless society and all that. And I'm like, well, I don't agree with all that. At the same time, there is a problem here. And that is the cashless society could hurt the most vulnerable. And, to some extent, I think if you inform the left of this is what's happening, they might rethink. I don't know. They might rethink those kinds of things. But anyway, what's your take?
Well, no, this sort of came up because I was seeing these pictures on social media about, people our businesses not taking cash, but not just that. It was, if you're going to use cash, right? So some businesses were accepting cash, but if you're going to use cash, you have to use exact change because there's this coin shortage, which I'm like, okay, I don't know where the coin.
Just mint new coins.
Yeah, they're like, we have to wait for the federal. We have to wait for the Federal Reserve to do something with the coin shortage, and I'm like, okay. But sort of the pendulum swing of that reaction has been, okay, this is new world order. This is, the mark of the beast is the cashless society. And it's like, okay, let's not swing the pendulum so far, but there is something to be said, I think, about the impact that a cashless society would have. And not just poor people, but like my kids are learning entrepreneurship by going out and doing things and making money. And they do that based on cash. You can't give to a poor person a red light if you don't have cash. So I think there's something to be said about the practicality of it. We talked about property rights before. How can we say that the digital currency that we hold is actually our property if you can't actually touch it? So I think there's something to be said about hard currency and having that in circulation and having that be a regular part of our economy.
Kerry, would you say that the whole debate now on cashless societies and this becoming more of an issue, is that this generation's gold standard debate?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, the thing about the gold standard debate was whether or not, the dollar had any value backed up to it. And, there's obviously the question of whether a digital currency has value, but there's the question of whether or not it's an actual thing. I mean, it seems to me that digital currency is just a series of binomials, and that intersects with the whole intellectual property rights thing, which libertarians, Rothbardian libertarians anyways, deny that the intellectual property rights exist. So if intellectual property rights don't exist, then digital currency can't technically exist.
I'm writing binomials down. Just want to make sure I got that word right. So.
Yeah, okay, good.
Well, but there is an innovation though. I mean, when you say digital currency, I want to be clear. Are you speaking of, strictly speaking, like the way in which the federal government is managing, ledger lines, or are you talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in the first place?
Well, I honestly, I mean, I've heard some things about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and how they're trying to make that very different from the situation that we have. But no, I'm talking about the what the federal government is doing and the way they're, Then
I agree with you. So
yeah,
that's fine. But I mean, if we're going,
even in next episode, we debate Bitcoin.
Well, but even with Bitcoin, I mean, how would that work with, kids who are trying to have a lemonade stand or poor people on the corner who just need to buy a burger?
Okay. The super short answer to that is that it would be still a problem if you were trying to do that with, say, divisibility of gold. But in the case of Bitcoin, it's actually more divisible and more portable than gold. So it actually is an advantage over what would be considered to be the libertarian standard in this regard. So that's the short answer. Now, that's backed up, I would have to say, with the theoretical foundation of what Bitcoin is and why digital scarcity is a real thing. Mm-hmm. And then of course, you have to get into, you mentioned like, how do you know that you own it? Well, okay, that's a whole nother issue. I mean, but even Stefan Kinsella has weighed in on that as with regards to, is Bitcoin ownable? And so I would refer you to that paper or at least his writings on that to get to that point. And so now I'm going to shut up.
So I think, here's the thing though, I think this whole debate allows us to really, as libertarians, push the conversation of it's really not about the digital currency and it's not really about the cash in itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's about the competitiveness of currency and that we should have that as a society so that people are free to choose that. But anyhow, I digress.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. I think, there's probably a conceivable way where you could have a legitimate cashless society, but we gotta deal with the freaking federal government first.
Well, when the monetary system is being, it is what it is right now. Yeah. That presents us a prescient problem and an existential threat to economic well-being.
That might have to be another episode as well, as how far do libertarians go where practicality is just all missed completely because reality does not fit the desire. But anyway.
Yeah. So we have federal government problems. And Matthew, you and I share the same state governor problem, which is that you and I are under the same orders, at least on paper or someone's piece of paper or digital signature or whatever our governor signs
visible lines and all.
Visible lines. Yeah. So you have a reopen PA background, as everybody can see.
you've been in charge of, I should say, you've been partly leading a movement to reopen PA. And what that brings to mind is, for Christians especially, but even just Americans, it's like, at what point is civil disobedience a good thing? Is it always okay? I mean, can we just always disobey the government? You and I both know, I'm not going to name any places here. So you and I both know places that are saying, we're just, like sheriffs and so forth, local government officials saying, we don't really like the governor. We're not going to enforce anything. And so there's a sense of nullification going on, but this is a Christian discussion as well. And so what do we do with the Christian morality of defying your governor? I mean, I've had conversations with people who are like, no, it's biblical to obey your government, and not in every case, but this doesn't seem like it's pushing it for them. What about you?
Yeah, I hear a lot of those arguments on Romans 13 and the tired old things that libertarians have had to, especially Christian libertarians, have had to deal with for a long time. That there's a simple phrase that I like to bring up to people who have that very sentiment of, well, shouldn't we obey the government? Romans 13 teaches us that we're to submit to these authorities and we're supposed to just shut up and listen. And I just have to say, okay, well, one, what and who is the ultimate authority of the land in this country? What we've agreed on, what we have chartered, who is the ultimate authority? And that is nebulously the people, but also our Constitution. And so when a governor or any other authority does not bend to those authorities, I believe it is the right and the ability of individuals within that government to stand up and say, you're not obeying God, governor. You're not doing what is necessary for good godly government. Your scales are out of balance. And so we need to, as individual Christians and those who support liberty, remind our civil servants, I'll just put that phrase out there, our civil servants, that they are under the authority of the people and the Constitution, not the people and the Constitution under the authority of the civil servants.
In other words, we have a responsibility to challenge.
Yes, absolutely.
It's part of the law. Like, one way that I think about it is, I grew up in a pretty conservative, setting, and it was like, it was against God's moral law to disobey the speed limit.
House, so
what's that? Yes, that's true. Well, I didn't grow up around here, but you could see. Yeah, okay. So, side story there. Speed limit, right? I grew up being told that if you disobey the speed limit, you're disobeying God, because the government said you should drive 55, and if you drive 56 and up, then you were just willingly, whatever, then you're disobeying. But when I began thinking about this as an adult, and I thought, wait a second, the law is written as such that the government actually has to evaluate its own laws on what the speed limit is based on what the people are actually driving. And there's laws that, like, every 2 years they have to survey a certain stretch of highway or whatever to make sure that the speed limit is actually keeping up with like what people are actually doing.
Correct.
In that particular law, it's built in that the people have a say in, we don't like this speed limit. And that is very quintessential American, in my opinion. And so to some extent, it's not a defiance of Romans 13 for me to say this leader is not, sorry, I just said leader. My goodness, Matt, you're going to have to slap me. Our civil servants, the person who thinks they're in charge of me, it's not a defiance of Romans 13 to defy the governor. Is what I meant to say.
Can we just call them
Kerry? I'm
wanton
sure you're defying
authoritarians?
your governor all the time. What's that?
Can we just call them wanton authoritarians?
There
Wanton
you go.
Authoritarians.
There you go.
Oh yeah, that's great.
I love that. Yes, and I've been actively defying my governor. Actually, the thing that came up recently about this was a Facebook post that I was interacting with a friend of mine who's a pastor and somebody who I have a great deal of respect for, and is against, patriarchalism and pietism and things like that. And he was saying that, even if Christians have a right to civil disobedience, that exercising civil disobedience is not an act of Christian love, and so it's immoral.
Whoa.
And
wow.
he said, man is lawless, and so we need the state. And you have to, which I pointed out the contradiction in that. But I thought it was interesting because there was a ton of people who got on after that, and they were like, if it's not an act of Christian love, then you can't do it. And I was just like, this is absurd. They're
saying that civil disobedience is not in and of itself not an act of Christian love, or like there are actions that, unless they are acts of Christian love?
Civil disobedience in and of itself, like even beyond that, exercising your rights when it could be perceived by some as, either against the law or, indirectly harming another person. So this was in the context of both fireworks and, I believe, the masks.
Please tell me you threw Henry David Thoreau in their faces.
No, I didn't even go that far. He sort of short circuited and shut down the conversation. Wow. But well, one of the things that I did, these people are opposed to abuse within the church, and I said, you guys are opposed to abuse. Like, this is on the basis of rights.
Oh, my word.
Another pastor got on there and he's like, no, confronting your abuser is an act of love. And I said, okay, but
really?
It's an assertion of rights. So, these things aren't mutually exclusive. Maybe it is an act of love, but it is an assertion of your rights. And, that was when they short circuited. But yeah, that's sort of the new thing that I'm seeing now.
That's remarkable, Kerry. That sort of behavior is precisely why, 12 now, it's almost 13 years. Is it 12? No, it's 12 years ago that I started libertarianchristians.com. Mm-hmm. It's because it's that sort of thing, that sort of cognitive dissonance amongst our fellow brothers and sisters is what we are ultimately fighting against
right
now.
Yeah.
If we have, I've said it many times that if we accomplish anything as LCI at all in this world, if we can just raise the level of conversation to where stuff like that is recognized, then we will have accomplished a good thing. So, kudos for standing up there and just letting them have it. Because that's the sort of stuff that needs to get,
call us next time and we'll join you
crushed.
In those
Note to self.
And even if they didn't ultimately get to the best conclusion from a conversation like that, if they can just realize how ridiculous the way that they're setting these assertions up together sound, that would be a positive victory.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm stunned as you're just describing this. It's like that sort of cognitive dissonance is not recognized immediately. I think, come on.
Yeah. Somebody
raised the level of conversation. 2. Yeah.
Somebody said that Christianity isn't rights oriented. And I was just like,
really?
Like what? Okay. Thou shalt not steal. Like, wow.
Yeah.
And,
even in the Levitical law, animals have a certain level of rights. Huh?
Oh man, this is like probably 2 or 3 articles, hint, that we could publish
next time
on our blog. But I want to keep our time to a reasonable amount so that we have more viewers. And also, as we have time, we want to talk. I would love to talk pop culture at the end of every episode if we have time and what we're consuming. So there's really only one topic right now in pop culture that should be talked about, because it's, everybody's watching it and hating on it or loving on it or whatever.
Dogmatic off the bat. Let's go.
And also, because we just talked about civil disobedience, and the ultimate act of civil disobedience was, of course, the American Revolution. And so if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, I'm talking about Hamilton going on Disney Plus and being available for us to watch. I don't know about Kerry and Matt. Norman and I have watched it this week, not together, separately, but we both watched it. I watched it with my entire family and 2 friends, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. There were a few annoying things about it that I was like, doggone it, Thomas Jefferson's way more of a hero than they made him out to be. But I absolutely loved the portrayal of the king. That guy was amazing.
Oh, and you know who he is, right?
No, who is it? I didn't notice. Oh no, who is it?
Jonathan Groff.
Oh,
Jonathan Groff.
Okay.
Who is Jonathan Groff? Maybe you'll remember him from some little kids movie called Frozen.
Was he Olaf?
He's a Lancastrian.
No, he was Kristoff.
He was Kristoff. Yeah. Okay.
He's a Lancastrian.
Josh Gad is Olaf, yeah. Oh, okay.
And so
we thoroughly loved him. It was probably the only part my kids understood because they couldn't follow because it's a rap musical, which was amazing. So
strictly hip hop, but let's
fine.
be clear. Come on.
Do I look like the kind of person who would know the difference?
Yeah.
Come on.
You look like a guy who listened, bobbed your head to Beastie Boys back in the day. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Who?
Are you sabotaging this now?
No, just a little bit. Norman, I'll let you speak. What did you think?
Well,
of
I mean,
Hamilton?
first of all,
should we cancel it?
Doggone it, no. The movie's fantastic, and the show is fantastic. The music is stellar, and Jonathan Groff is a highlight. I mean, that riff is just killer, and you'll know exactly what I mean when you hear it. It's terrific. But no, this movie's great for a variety of reasons. There's some great stuff. There's so many good things to talk about. We've been talking about central banking the whole time. Well, a central piece of it is, frankly, Hamilton establishing the nation's first bank, national bank. Now, we could agree here and that this is a terrible thing, and for any number of reasons. And the show pitches it in a bit softer way. It kind of sets up the national banking system, if you will, as being a huge innovation and an important piece of making America prosperous. And that's not really historical per se. But if we move aside from that for a second and just talk about like what's the narrative about, what is the story trying to convey? I mean, there's so many interesting meta messages and things that are going on in it that I actually think this might be one of the best things for the country to view right now, especially given what we've been talking about with cancel culture and which is also leading to disintegration of the appreciation of history and so on, as Matt alluded to earlier, going to pieces of our history in the locations they're in. Like this is great for people to see, because even though it does, kind of point out the contradiction of freedom and slavery in early America, which is, I mean, admittedly is it's present. It is part of the history of America, right? Mm-hmm. It does it in such a way where it doesn't try to cancel it out or try to, overlaud people for being one way or the other even. I think it's actually pretty appreciative and celebrates the history in a way that's just great. Even as it pertains to Hamilton, there's a lot of ways we could criticize Hamilton from, the effects that he ultimately had.
You're talking about the person, right?
Yeah, and the policies that he promoted and whatnot. I mean, this is the guy who basically, and it even alludes to this, although it doesn't quite make it crystal clear. In the show, Hamilton is surprised when George Washington says, "I'm not going to, continue running for president." And so there's a whole song about teaching them to say goodbye.
Yeah. And
it makes it kind of sound like Hamilton was instrumental to that effect, but he really did want a permanent president. Like that was the point. He really wanted that type of strong federal apparatus. Even. Yeah. And that's indicative of from the national bank and whatnot. But even so, this is a guy who was a freedom fighter, who was instrumental in the founding of America. Then we can appreciate that about him while also being critical of his ultimate policies that he did want to promote. And it also humanizes him. If you follow with the narrative of the film, you go from oh man, this guy is great, to this guy's a total scuzzbucket, to oh my gosh, I have huge empathy for him. And I mean, and this happens in the matter of minutes. And so it does a great job of telling the story. And I thought it was great. I love the music.
Cool.
I mean, I'm not really a hip hop guy. I'm more of a, modern fingerstyle guitar guy and rock and roll, but I loved it. I thought it was great.
Well, you've convinced me. I'm going to check it out now.
It's absolutely worth it.
Begrudgingly join the rest of popular society.
No, it's all good. For those who are Hamilton haters, the Hamilton, the Alexander, the person, haters, the show, I will just kind of plug that they make him a very troubled man in a certain way. This is not idolizing Hamilton the way I kind of expected it to be. They sort of idolize certain parts of his legacy, but not the person. He had a lot of, it was not all positive, and they did not portray him all that way. So in the spirit of Hamilton,
confused about that, but that's fine.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kerry.
You guys are saying that we can actually learn something of our history, celebrate our history, and be critical of it at the same time?
Yes.
Amazing.
That is fundamentally American. Yes, that is. All right. Hallelujah. So in the spirit of the show Hamilton, we need to wrap up. And so this was our first video episode of Good News, Bad News from Libertarian Christian Institute. Let us know in the comments or through email or whatever, however you want to reach us, libertarianchristians.com. How do we do? What do you want us to talk about next time? How frequently would you like us to do this? And you can also tell us what you didn't like.
Yeah.
Let us know how much you really loved Kerry or Matt. Maybe Norman and me. Who knows?
Analyze Doug's bookshelf and tell him where he's wrong.
Right.
Yeah, you can pause it and zoom in and tell me, which books are worth it. So, all right.
What background should I have next week?
Yes. So thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Libertarian Christian Podcast. If you liked today's episode, we encourage you to rate us on Apple Podcasts to help expand our audience. If you want to reach out to us, email us at podcast@libertarianchristians.com. You can also reach us at LCI Official on Twitter. And of course, we are on Facebook and have an active group you are welcome to join. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Libertarian Christian Podcast is a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute, a registered 501c3 nonprofit. If you'd like to find out more about LCI, visit us on the web at libertarianchristians.com. The voiceovers are by Matt Bellis and Catherine Williams. As of episode 115, our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
Hey, podcast listeners. Since you like listening to audio content, we wanted to let you know about a new audiobook titled Called to Freedom: Why You Can Be Christian and Libertarian. It's read by me, Jacqueline Isaacs, one of the contributing authors of the book, and every download helps to support the Libertarian Christian Institute. To learn more and to download the audiobook today, go to calltofreedombook.com.